The only thing bad about having a dream about being in prison is having a dream about being in prison and literally waking up being in prison. There's something about that reality that always startled me. Every time I was in prison and I had a dream about being in prison and I woke up and I was still in prison, I didn't know what to do with myself. It took me a moment, like fish out of water, in shock. Actually, it was probably better being a fish out of water being in shock, because a fish out of water being in shock at least knows that the end is inevitable without water. Being in prison, they still feed you. You still got air, but you could still go back to sleep and be in prison and wake up in prison. After all, now that I think about it, even if it was just a dream, it was more like a nightmare. Do you understand how many times I dreamt I was in prison? And my dreams were like those surreal dreams you see in movies that just don't make no sense. And you know, when you're watching a movie, it's just a dream because it doesn't make any sense to the movie. That's exactly how my dreams were when I was in prison. The dreams didn't make any sense, but somehow when I woke up in prison, that made sense, because that's where I was supposed to be, because that's where I really was. So it was kind of like a nightmare. So having nightmares and dreams in prisons and waking up in prisons is crazy. And you don't know nothing about it unless you know something about it. And if this ain't making no sense, that's how the dreams in prison are. They just don't make no sense. I know this sounds crazy because it is crazy. Ask anybody who's been to prison, especially ask them if they're doing life in prison or done 20 plus years in prison. I only done 10 years and my dreams were nightmares. This is some crazy stuff to think about. I know. I remember one time I woke up in the cell block and I literally woke up and I screamed. It was in the middle of, and then it wakes other people up, and then other people are like, whoa, somebody had a nightmare, bro. And you know, some people just sleep through it, but you can hear dudes whispering in other cells. And they're like, oh, he must be dreaming about getting that thing. If you know what that thing is, that's what they always talk about. Every day in prison is crazy thinking about that thing. What is that thing, you might ask? Well, it's your private part. Everything in prison, it's just constantly, it's like second nature. The ignorance goes back to people talking about their private parts. I know it's insane, but even when you wake up from nightmares disturbed, nobody's concerned about you. They start joking and playing and making games and fun about it. And the reality is, every single one of them has something that scares them. Every single one of them has something that's a nightmare. Every single one of them has nightmares and dreams. No one's exempt from it. Everybody goes through it. There was a book I read while I was in prison. It was George Orwell's 1984. And if you're familiar with it, it is like a real nightmare. It reads like a real nightmare because of the reality of it that may or may not happen that you can apply to life, kind of sort of like a dream. Well, in George Orwell's 1984, which might I add, I read in prison, there's a room called Room 101. Well, Room 101 is a place where the government brings you, and it's where they find out your deepest, darkest fear. Yes, every single one of us has a deepest, darkest fear. And once they find out what it is, they use it as a weapon. Well, sometimes our nightmares in prison may be our deepest, darkest fear. And I've come to realize when you are in prison long enough and you've been in enough cell blocks and enough dormitories, you're going to eventually hear men wake up in the middle of the night screaming. You'll see them sitting there, huddled by their bed, shivering, sweating, and you don't know what it is that they dreamed about. And even though the laughs and chuckles come from other inmates being silly, they can't escape the inevitable neither. It's almost like a real life nightmare on Elm Street. You know someone's coming. It may not be Freddy, but it's somebody from Room 101. It's the deepest, darkest secret that we all fear. And everybody has something that scares them. Everybody has something that they're hiding from somebody that they don't want nobody to know that they're afraid of. And you know what? Sometimes in your dreams, that thing or that someone visits. And when they visits, you get scared. You get nervous. And so that's what I think people dream about when they're in prison. Sometimes they have their Room 101 moment and they just don't want to share it. Why don't they want to share it? Who wants to share their deepest, darkest fear? You don't want to give that information out, because if you give it away, then somebody's going to use it against you. So you got to be smart. You keep it to yourself. But then you realize in prison, you can't share nothing. There was no way in the world when I had my deepest, darkest nightmares and I woke up that time screaming in prison, I was never going to tell nobody what it is that I had dreamed about that scared me so much that made me scream when I was in a prison because it haunted me in my nightmare or it visited me in my nightmare. It's a lie anyway. Plus, you can't tell nobody because it was something that scared me that I knew that people would use against me. So I don't share it. Man, you got to be smart. Don't share your deepest, darkest fears with anybody. You better make sure you can trust that person. It better be your mother, who you know you can trust. It better be your wife, somebody whom you know has your back and she's going to pray for you and stand in the gap for you. You know what I mean? It better be a good friend who been with you for your whole life and you know he done took some rounds for you, if you know what I mean. He done stood by you and didn't back down on you, you know what I mean? It better be the right person, because if you share your deepest, darkest fear with somebody and they're the wrong person, they're going to expose it to the world. They're going to turn on you, and then the world's going to know what your deepest, darkest fear is. Or maybe just like Batman, right? You're going to have to confront the bats so that you have authority over that fear. I still haven't confronted all my fears. Some of my fears I have. You know what I mean? But I'm not in prison no more. So when I wake up, I'm in my own house. I can take a walk around the block. I can go get me a snack. I can go do anything I want. I'm not stuck in a jail cell, but I'm telling you, man, if you've ever been to prison, please share in the comments below what that felt like when you woke up in the middle of the night from having that crazy dream or that nightmare, or you dreamt that you were in prison and you woke up in prison. There was nothing like that, man. Sometimes I still have dreams about prison while I'm out here on the streets, and I always wake up and I'm like, man, at least that dream wasn't as crazy as the dream I had when I was in prison, that I was in prison, that I woke up in prison. Now I wake up from having a dream about being in prison, which occasionally I still do, and I actually wake up and I'm home, and I don't have to think about that anymore. Anyway, give the Pen and the Shank a like and subscribe. I told you on this channel it's going to be unusual and unique. We're going to talk about different things like dreams and nightmares in prison, not the same old prison stories that you hear pretty much everywhere. I want to do things a little bit different. There's other topics that we can cover. There's other stories that we can cover that you might not have heard of. So give me a like and subscribe, and thanks for sharing. Man, let's get it.